الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وأصحاب سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا سيدي يا حبيب الله. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رحمة للعالمين وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا سيدي يا شفيع المذنبين. Right, so back to where we left off immediately. The last thing was praying 3 units instead of 4. And the next thing is Man Salla Zohr Khamsan, who, if somebody is praying Zohr prayer, but it's not specific to Zohr prayer obviously. In other words, by Zohr it means any 4-unit prayer. So if somebody is praying a 4-unit prayer and he prays 5 instead, what should that person do? Again, we have a narration from Sayyidina Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala. He says, Anna Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam sallat Zohr khamsan. On one occasion, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam prayed Zohr salah 5 units. Faqila lahu, and it was said to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, O Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, has the prayer increased? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam then asked, he said, what does this mean? How is the prayer increased? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was then informed that you prayed 5 units. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam then did sajda of sahab after completing that prayer. So in terms of with that, an additional unit, if one realizes an additional unit should be added, and sajda sahab should be made at the end, and then that will complete the 4 units of fard, and the additional 2 would become nafal. Again, this thing about talking in between the Prophet and walking away, like I said, this is not what we practice, and for your understanding, what would be sufficient is that this can be considered a khasa and particular for the Prophet ﷺ. The ruling being that as long as you've not turned away from the diet. So in terms of breaking the prayer, remember, obviously we haven't come to or perhaps we've looked at the things that invalidate the prayer. Yes, and so in terms of looking around with the eyes, not recommended but won't invalidate the prayer. Even turning the head, again not recommended but won't invalidate the prayer. What will invalidate the prayer is if you turn entirely your body away from the direction of the Qibla. Right? Once it goes beyond 45 degrees from the exact precise direction, that will invalidate the prayer. So by talking or by turning away entirely from the direction of the Qibla, it's not possible then to go back to that original prayer and carry on. Then it would need to be restarted. Right, another scenario, another situation. So it's just going through various different, yes?
Sorry, did you say that if it was 5 units, you'd add another one on to make 6?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
first 4 or 5 in the second
Yeah.
unit?
Okay. So he's going through various scenarios, various situations, first of all based on the occurrences that we have in a hadith, things that would require sajda sahab, and then perhaps other things. So another scenario, another situation, if somebody has done 3 sajdas, man sajada thalatha sajdat, so someone who has done 3 prostrations. So Ibrahim al-Nakha'i rahimahullah ta'ala, he narrates again regarding a person who has done 3 sajdas forgetfully. So instead of 2 prostrations in any one unit, he has done 3. He says that person must do sujood al-sahwi, must perform the prostrations of forgetfulness. And this is something Rawahul Imam Muhammad fil Athar, Imam Muhammad rahimahullah ta'ala, he narrated this in Kitab al-Athar, and he has said, وَبِهِ نَأْخُذْ, and this is what we have adopted as an opinion, this is what we take in a Hanafi madhab, وَهُوَ قَوْلُ أَبِي حَنِيفَةَ rahimahullah ta'ala, and this is the opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. Right, so this is our stance within the Hanafi madhab, that if someone does 3 sajdas, that person is to then, and one of the reasons for that is because one of the reasons for that obligates sajda to sahv or prostrations of forgetfulness is either missing something which is wajib or delaying something which is fard. And the delay that is that obligates sujood al-sahv is to the extent of one rukn, one pillar, in terms of like a ruku, sajda, etc. So 3 tasbihat. If you cause that length of delay in any fard, then you need to do sajda of sahv. And so that's what happens here, because whatever the situation, you're causing a delay in the prayer. But even as a as a standalone sort of mas'ala, excuse me, standalone issue, by doing 3 sajdas, it obligates sajda of sahv. Sayyidina Mughira bin Shu'ba radiyallahu ta'ala, he says that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that if the Imam stands after 2 units, and if he remembers before he's closer to standing, then he should come back, he should sit down. If he's closer to standing, then he should stand and continue with his prayer. And then he should do sajda of sahv, of forgetfulness. And Sayyidina Mughira bin Shu'ba radiyallahu ta'ala, he narrates again that if any of you become doubtful after 2 prayers, and then he stood up, after standing up, he should not come back into tashahhud. He should carry on. And he should finish his prayer and then do sajda of sahv afterwards. So from there, the principle is derived that if after 2 units you need to do tashahhud, if someone forgets, begins to stand, if he's closer, but he remembers, if he's closer to the sitting position, then he should sit down and do the tashahhud. If he's, however, closer to the standing position, then he should stand up and finish off the rest of the prayer and do sajda sahv. Sadim rahimahullah narrates from Sayyidina Abdullah bin Umar radiyallahu ta'ala. He says that إِذَا شَكَّ أَحَدُكُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِ, if someone encounters any kind of doubt during the prayer, he should then think about whatever he believes he's forgotten in the prayer. He should complete that, he should do that, and then at the end he should do sajda of sahv, he should do sajda of prostration. Sayyidina Abdullah al-Azadi radiyallahu ta'ala, he narrates that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam stood up in Zohar prayer when he was to be sitting in tashahhud, he stood up instead. After completing the prayer, the Prophet ﷺ did 2 sajdas, and before each of the sajdas he said takbir, said Allahu Akbar, and the people followed the Prophet ﷺ in everything that the Prophet ﷺ had done. So they stood when the Prophet ﷺ stood instead of sitting. Then at the end, when the Prophet ﷺ did the prostrations of forgetfulness, they they also followed, and they did what the Prophet ﷺ did. Now, before you do sajda of sahv, you are to sit in tashahhud. That's the next section, or the next hadith, is related to tashahhud. Fi sujood al-sahv, tashahhud in sajda of sahv. Yes.
So, you know, not so much forgetting the units. Once you start reading different things at different stages. For instance, you're on your second unit when there's 4, and you've read Durud Sharif with your Tahiyya, or you're still going down to Ruku and you read something else. Do you have to do sajda sahv then as well? Like you forget what you've read, or you're supposed to read a certain thing and you're not ready?
It depends, because the tasbihat, they are sunnah. And the obviously qira'ah, it's fard to read some part of the Quran, then it's wajib to read al-Fatiha and also to read a surah with it in the first 2 units and so on. So obviously if you miss a fard, then the prayer is invalid altogether. If you miss wajib forgetfully or by mistake, then you have to do sajda sahv. With the sunnah, there's no, you shouldn't miss it, but there's nothing you can do to recover it, and it doesn't obligate sajda sahv or repeating the prayer either. If in the first tashahhud you continue and you start to read Durud Sharif when you're supposed to be standing up, again, if that delay constitutes the length of one rukn, because you've delayed a fard which is qiyam of the 3rd unit, you'll have to do sajda sahv. Even though you're reciting durud, you still have to do sajda sahv. So yeah, the next thing, tashahhud. Sayyidina Imran bin Hussein radiyallahu ta'ala, he says that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he prayed with them, and the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam salla bihim fasaha. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed with them, in other words, he led them in the prayer, and he forgot. Fasajada sajdatain, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did 2 sajdas. Thumma tashahhad, then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did tashahhud. Thumma sallam, then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did salam. So it tells you that after the sajda of sahv, you are to repeat tashahhud and do salam as well. And that's narrated by Imam Bukhari in his Sahih. The previous hadith of Abdullah al-Azadi, Salatul Zuhr, the Prophet ﷺ sitting, standing instead of sitting for the first tashahhud. That hadith, that's narrated by Imam Bukhari, as we mentioned previously as well. This hadith of Imran bin Hussein radiyallahu ta'ala, this is narrated by Imam Tirmidhi in his Sunan. Prostration of forgetfulness after salam, so saying salam before sajda of sahv as well. Again, narrated by Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala, he says, Anna Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam salla zuhr khamsan, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed 5 units in zuhr. It was said to him, has the prayer increased? And he asked, this is that same hadith that's already been mentioned before. And what it mentions at the end is that the Prophet ﷺ did the sajda of prostrations after salam. So it's just establishing through a hadith the method of doing sajda of sahv, which is tashahhud, then salam, then 2 sajdas of sahv, then tashahhud again, and then salam again. So he's just separately establishing the sequence of the sequence of events through a hadith. And this is one that's been repeated previously as well, and it's narrated in Sahih Bukhari. If the follower forgets something or makes some kind of a mistake when he's praying with the imam, he is not to do sajda of sahab, prostrate for forgetfulness, individually. But if the imam forgets, then the whole congregation does sajda of sahab. That's what Imam Sawaji then now is going to talk about. So laysa ala al-muqtadi sahab. There's no sajda of sahab for a muqtadi. So the follower, he's done something wrong, he's made a mistake. If he was praying alone, then he would have to do sajda sahab. But because he's with the imam, there's no sahab, there's no sujood of sahab. On the other hand, if the imam makes a mistake, that mistake is the imam's, but the whole congregation will follow him in sajda of sahab. So Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he narrates from his father radiallahu ta'ala, who narrates from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Laysa ala man khalf al-imam sahw. The Prophet ﷺ said there is no prostrations of forgetfulness for the one who is praying behind the imam. In other words, that means when he as an individual forgets during jama'ah, during the congregational prayer, he is not to do sajda sahw on his own. There's no sajda sahw for him. فَإِنْ سَهَى الْإِمَامِ. However, if the imam forgets, فَعَلَيْهِ, then he must follow the imam in sajda sahw. So فَعَلَيْهِ, it's upon the sajda, that sajda sahw is obligatory upon the imam. وَعَلَى مَنْ خَلْفَهُ, then also upon whoever is praying behind the imam as well. So the imam and all the muqtadis, everyone following him will do sahab as well. And the Prophet said also, وَيَنْتَهَا Man khalf al-imam, whoever forgets and he's praying behind the imam, there's no sahab for him. Wal imamu kafih, the imam is sufficient for him.
So what if the imam forgets and then remembers after? So how would it work with that? Because then no one's there. So, but the prayer's been invalidated, so how would it go?
No, I mean if there's no if he has forgotten and completed the prayer and he's not remembered, then that prayer is considered complete.
That's complete. Okay.
So Ibrahim an-Nakha'i rahimahullah ta'ala, he says that إِذَا سَهَى الْإِمَامِ, when the imam forgets, and he does prostrations of forgetfulness, فَاسْجُدْ مَعَهُ, prostrate with him. And if he doesn't prostrate, وَإِن لَمْ يَسْجُدْ مَعَهُ, if he doesn't do the prostrations of sahab, فَلَيْسَ عَلَيْكَ أَن تَسْجُدْ, then it's not upon you to do sajda of sahab. And that's narrated by Imam Muhammad in Kitab al-Athar, and he narrates that this is our opinion, the Hanafi madhab, وَهُوَ قَوْلُ أَبِي Hanifa, and this is the view of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. Another thing that Imam Saghaji mentions now is that sajdat as-sahw fil fard wal nafl sawa, that sajda of sahw in fard and nafl prayer are the same. The conditions are the same, the method is the same. Whether it's an obligatory prayer or an optional prayer, sajda sahw is done for the same reasons, in the same way, in the same method. There's no difference. So Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala, he narrates, Anna Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam qal, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, that when any one of you stands for prayer, ja'a shaitan, the shaitan comes, and he makes him forget. حتى لا يدري كم صلى. So the shaitan comes to you while you're praying and he tries to make you forget, to the extent that the person no longer remembers how many units he's prayed. So when any one of you finds himself in this position, what should he do? فَلْيَسْجُدْ سَجْدَتَيْن. He should do 2 sajdas, وَهُوَ جَالِس, while he's sitting. That means after the last tashahhud. That's narrated in Sahih Bukhari. So this is something that the shaitan does that also tells you about, it gives you a reasoning or logic for this happening as well. And also there's no distinction between any kind of prayer there. Fard, wajib, nafal, whatever, sunnah. There's no distinction of any kind of prayer. So this tells you that this ruling is for prayer in general, any kind of prayer. That's what Imam Saghazi is saying anyway. So now we come to a summary of this whole discussion. Imam Saghazi, rahimahullah ta'ala, he gives a summary from himself, and he says, Man shakka fi salatihi, if someone has doubt in his prayer, falam yadri kam salla, and he doesn't know how many units he's prayed. Wa kana dhalika awwalu ma arada lahu. This is the first time that this has happened to him after he's become baligh. Reason why he says that, because if he's been praying from before he was baligh, as a child, then children are likely to forget, and they don't. There's that attention to detail in prayer may not be there. It doesn't count, and also he's not mukallaf at that point anyway. He's not obligated to follow the command at that point. So after becoming baligh, if this is the first time that it's happened, then he should repeat the prayer. If, however, he's forgetting frequently, then he should continue his prayer based upon ala ghalibi zannihi, based upon his own personal dominant perception, whatever he's leaning towards. Wa taharra sawab, and he should think to establish. He should think for a moment and try to establish what the correct number is, and whatever he's content with, then he should continue with that. If he has no, for example, he has no recollection at all, completely undecided, and has no idea, even after thinking he can't decide whether it's 3 or 4, then he should continue ala al-yaqeen, on the most certain number. So, for example, if he's doubtful, have I prayed 3 or 4? What's yaqeen is the lower number, isn't it? If his doubt is whether he's prayed 3 or 4, then the yaqeen, the certainty, would be with the lower number. That's what he should follow then. And then he should do tashahhud in any place that could be the end of his prayer. Right? So based on the doubt that he had whether it's 3 or 4 units, he should then, or it could be any number of units where he's developed a doubt, but he should then do tashahhud at every place where it could possibly be the end of his prayer. And why? Because out of fear of not missing, because remember the last sitting is fard. Don't want to miss that. So pretty much what it's saying is subsequently from there on, every unit prayed, do tashahhud after it, because that could be the last unit of the prayer, and you don't want to miss the last sitting, and then do sajda sahw at the end. وسجود السهو واجب في الزيادة والنقصان. Sajda sahw is obligatory for an excess or an omission from the prayer. Right? If something is added or omitted from the prayer, added to or omitted from the prayer, in both situations, sajda sahw can become wajib. The sajda is wajib after salam. Ba'da salam, yasjudu sajdatain, he should do 2 sajdas. Thumma, then he should do tashahud and say salam again. فَلَوْ سَجَدَ قَبْلَ السَّلَامِ, if he does sajda of sahw before saying salam, jaza, it is permissible. إِلَّا أَنَّ الْأَوَّلْ أَوْلَى, except that the first option or first opinion, that do salam then do sajda sahw, this is better, it's awla. But if he was to do sajda sahw before saying salam, this would be permissible as well. وَيَكْتَفِي بِسَلَامٍ وَاحِدٍ عَلَى الْيَمِينِ, saying salam when doing sajda sahw, saying salam once to the right and then going into sajda is enough. Doesn't need to say both salam. Just one salam to the right and then go into sajda sahw. And this is why if somebody joins the prayer late, it's recommended, Jamaat, if someone joins the congregation late, it's recommended, obviously he's going to have to stand up and finish off his prayer, the units that he's missed with the Imam. He'll have to make them up. It's recommended for that person to wait until Imam says salam, not just to the right, but to the left as well. So don't stand up. If he's come late and he needs to make up the units that he's missed, wait until the Imam has said salam to the left as well, then stand up. Why? Because if you stand up when the Imam said salam to the right, it's possible that the Imam then may go into sajda sahw, and you may not be aware of that, and that will then cause issues. But anyway, so one salam is sufficient to the right, and it has been said, there is a opinion, but he says qila, which is passive past tense, which means it has been said, or it was said, which is usually used to denote a weak opinion or not a favorable opinion. So he says that it has been said that you should say salam both sides and then do sajda sahw. But when he says qila, it means that's not the opted opinion. So say salam, then say Allahu Akbar. So salam to one side, then say takbir, say Allahu Akbar, then do a sajda, come out of that sajda, say Allahu Akbar again, go into second sajda, then come out of the second sajda with takbir, and then say tashahud and dua, and then salam. Right? So this time recite the whole tashahud including dua, and then say salam. Sahv is also obligatory. Imam Saghaji says, إِذَا زَادَ فِي صَلَاتِهِ فِعْلًا مِنْ جِنْسِهَا لَيْسَ مِنْهَا. When somebody adds to the prayer something that is generally considered part of the prayer, but does not belong in that particular place. Right? So he does, for example, the third sajda. Now sajda is an act of prayer. He's not done something that it should, that is not done inside the prayer, but it doesn't belong there. The third sajda is additional. So that's what it means. Sahv is also obligated by doing something which in its nature is part of the prayer, but shouldn't be done in that place. Kama idha raka'a ruku'ain. So for example, somebody does ruku' twice, or does sajda 3 times instead of 2 times. So Imam Saghaji says, فَالرُّكُوعُ الثَّانِي مِنْ حَيْثُ إِنَّهُ رُكُوع. The second ruku' from the perspective of being ruku', فَهُوَ مِنْ جِنْسِ الصَّلَاةِ, it is an act of salah, an act of prayer. وَلَكِنَّهُ لَيْسَ مِنْهَا, but it's not part of that prayer. It's additional to that particular position in the prayer. لِكَوْنِهِ زَائِدًا, because it's extra, it's additional. In the same way, وَيَجِبُ سُجُودُ السَّهْوِ إِذَا تَرَكَ فِعْلًا وَاجِبًا. Sajda sahab is also obligated if he omits an act which is wajib, which is necessary. And عُرِفَ وُجُوبُهُ بِالسُّنَّةِ, the obligation of that act, the fact that what he's missed is wajib, is known through sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? So Sajda sahab is also obligated if somebody misses anything which is wajib, like for example, in a 3 or 4 unit prayer, the middle sitting, the first qa'da of first tashahhud is wajib. We know that from sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So this is what he's saying. Any act which is wajib and it is known to be wajib, proven to be wajib from sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. If someone misses such an act which is wajib, kal qa'datil ula, like the first sitting, أو قام في موضع القعود, or he stood up where he's supposed to be sitting, أو ترك سجدة التلاوة عن موضعها, or he has missed sajda of tilawat, of recitation. He recited an ayah which obligates, during his prayer he recited a verse which obligates sajda. That sajda is wajib, sajda of tilawat is wajib, and he's missed it. أو ترك قراءة الفاتحة, or he's missed the recitation of Al-Fatiha. أو القنوت, or he's missed qunut in witr, or the takbir for qunut, or he's missed tashahhud in the qa'da. Right, both of the qa'das, the sitting itself, the first sitting, the act of sitting in any prayer that is more than 2 units, the first sitting, the act of sitting is wajib. Reciting tashahhud at tahiyyat is also wajib. That's wajib. They're 2 separate wajibs. Sitting is wajib and reciting at tahiyyat is wajib in the first qa'da. If it's the last one, so if you're praying 2 units, then there is only 1 qa'da. There will only be a last sitting. There's no middle sitting. If you're praying more than 2 units, then the last sitting, that sitting, the act of sitting, and for sitting how long? The act of sitting for the length of time that it would take you to recite tashahhud is fard. So for that length of time to sit in that position. In the same way, if it's the first or middle tashahhud, sitting for the length of time that it would take you to recite tashahhud, the act of sitting is wajib. The recitation of tashahhud in both of a tahiyyat in both of those sittings is wajib in itself. So when you're doing the last sitting, the act of sitting is fard, for the length of time it takes you to recite tashahhud. The recitation of the tashahhud is wajib. So they considered 2 separate acts. The sitting and the reciting are 2 separate acts. So in either one of the qa'das, it could be the first one or the last one, even though the first one would be wajib, the second one would be fard. The recitation in both of them is wajib. The sitting is different depending on which one it is, wajib and fard. The recitation in them is wajib in both sittings. Does that make sense?
If it's 4 units, the second sitting, it's not first to sit. Like it is sitting, but not to sit for that length of time. That's wajib. But in the last one, it's first.
Yeah, you seem a little confused. Let me explain it again. When we say last sitting, we mean if you're praying 2 units, then there's only 1 tashahhud. Right? So that's the last sitting. If you're praying more than 2 units, if it's fard prayer, then it'll be 3 or 4, won't it? Maghrib or any of the other prayers will be 4. So if you're praying more than 2 units, then you will sit after 2, and then you will sit on conclusion of the prayer. The first sitting is wajib. The act of sitting is wajib. Reciting at-tahiyyat is wajib also. 2 separate wajibs. Then in the last sitting where you're concluding the prayer, whether it's after 2, whether it's after 3, whether it's after 4, the concluding sitting, that is fard, for the length of time that it takes you to recite at-tahiyyat. The actual reciting of at-tahiyyat is wajib. So reciting at-tahiyyat in both of them is wajib. If it's not the concluding sitting, then that sitting is considered to be wajib. If it's a concluding one, then the act of sitting itself is fard. Yes? Any confusion?
It's fine.
It was a bit of a mouthful, but hopefully it makes sense. Yeah. So that's one of the examples of missing a wajib, is he misses the recitation of tashahhud in any one of the 2 sittings. Or in Eid Salah, the extra takbirs that are recited, the 6 additional takbirs that are called by the Imam, where the congregation, they raise their hands and they lower them again after each takbir. In the first unit, these are before the recitation, and in the second unit, they are after the recitation. 6 extra takbirs, and they are wajib. So if they are missed, or if the Imam, remember, Zohar, Asr, both of these prayers, the Imam does not recite audibly. He recites quietly. This is wajib. It's wajib for the Imam to recite quietly. In the same way, in Fajr, Maghrib and Isha, the Imam recites audibly in the first 2 units. There, it is wajib for the Imam to recite audibly. So if that is missed, right? So for example, in Maghrib prayer, the Imam does not recite audibly, he forgets to recite audibly. Or in Zohar prayer, he begins to recite audibly. And he recites enough, audibly he recites enough of the Quran that would be sufficient for the prayer to be completed. So what it means basically, he started reciting, and what's the fard requirement for salah in terms of qira'ah? 3 short verses, or 1 long verse equivalent to 3 short verses. If that amount he's recited audibly, then he must do sajda sahw. Even if after that he's realized and he started then reciting quietly. And there is a dispute regarding whether in these last 2, whether if the Imam begins to recite audibly, or if he in Zohar prayer, or if he recites quietly in Maghrib, whether sajda sahw should be done or not. Al-Hidayah, which is one of our most authentic and detailed manuals of Hanafi fiqh, the opinion that's given in there is that there won't be sajda sahw in those situations. Even though it is wajib to recite audibly or quietly respectively, but that it will not obligate sajda of sahw. In addition to this, the sahv of the Imam, the forgetfulness of the Imam, will obligate sajdas upon the muqtadi, the follower as well. If the Imam does not do the sajdas, then the muqtadi will not do the sajdas as well. If the Imam makes a mistake, if the muqtadi, the follower makes a mistake, the Imam does not have to do sajda sahw, nor does the follower. No one does sajda sahw. if someone forgets Qa'da al-Ula, the first sitting, then he remembers and he's closer to the sitting position, then he should come back into the sitting position and he should do his at-tahiyyat. If, however, he's closer to standing, then he shouldn't come back into tashahhud. Then he should stand up and carry on with his prayer, and he should do sajda of sahw. If someone forgets the last sitting and stands up for the fifth unit, then he should come back. Why? What's the difference between the two? The first sitting was wajib. He's gone into, by standing up or being closer to standing up, he has gone into an act which is fard. Qiyam is fard, standing is fard. So he's missed the wajib and he's gone to something which is fard. Don't come back from that fard for something which is wajib, which is inferior to it. On the other hand, his sitting for the last qa'da is what? It's fard. And without it the prayer will be incomplete and will be nullified if he doesn't do it. So now if he's prayed all 4 units, now he's stood up for the 5th one, whatever time he remembers at any point before going into sajda. So if he remembers, even if he's fully standing, even in ruku, even when he stands up from ruku, even if he's going into sajda, even if at that point he remembers that he's already prayed 4 and he's now engaged in the 5th unit, go back to tashahhud. Go back to the last sitting. So leave the unit wherever he's got to, go back to the last sitting. And he should void that 5th unit, go back to the last sitting, and then he should do sajda of sahw. If he goes into sajda of the 5th unit, then his prayer is invalid. Right? Because now he has completely missed that last sitting and he's missed the opportunity. Now the prayer becomes invalid. His prayer, according to Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf, will then become nafal. So add another unit, because all prayers other than Maghrib and Witr are multiples of 2, make it 6 and finish off, and that becomes nafal. And then he will need to pray again. So he'll need to add an extra unit, because there's no odd number of units in terms of nafal prayers, and then he should complete the prayer and he should repeat his prayer again. If, however, now there's another possible situation as well. Someone's praying a 4-unit prayer, and this could even work for a 2-unit prayer, because there's only one tashahhud there, and that's the last one, and that's fard. So in a 2-unit prayer, he does the tashahhud and then stands up for the 3rd unit. In a 4-unit prayer, he's done the tashahhud, the last sitting, he's done the last sitting, but then stands up thinking he's only prayed 2, stands up for the 5th unit. The difference between the 2 situations was, in the first situation, he didn't sit at all. He forgot to sit, and he stood up for a 5th unit. Usually that will be thinking that he's standing up for the 4th unit. He's actually prayed all 4 of them. He's not done the at-tahiyyat, he's not done the sitting, he's stood straight up, but it's actually the 5th one. If he remembers in that case, at any point before sajda, then he should come back. If he's done the sitting, right, he's prayed, he's completed all of his units, he's done the last sitting, then he stands up forgetfully, then what should he do? Then he doesn't do salam. So he's done this last sitting, he doesn't do salam, thinking that this is my first qa'da, I need to stand up and pray 2 more units. He should come back and he should come back into the tashahhud position. And he should give salam without repeating his at-tahiyyat, because he's already prayed, he's already recited that. So he'd come back into tashahhud, sit, and say salam. And if he says salam even while standing, Imam Sagharji says that his prayer will be complete, because he's essentially, by completing his last sitting, he has completed his prayer. The only thing now left for him to do is to exit by saying salam. If he does that standing, that will be valid as well. But he will be violating the sunnah by doing so, by saying salam standing. If, however, in the fifth he stood up, but now remember we're looking at a different scenario now. Here he's done at-tahiyyat, he's done the last sitting, and then he stood up for an extra unit. And in this unit he doesn't remember until he's gone into sajda. He completes that fifth unit with a sajda. Now what should he do? In the previous case, his prayer was invalid and he has to start all over again, and whatever he's prayed will become nafil. But here, now he should again add another unit to it. And again, the reason being that there isn't odd number of units in nafil, so he should add another unit, and then then he should do a tahiyyat, do salam, complete his prayer as normal, add a sixth unit to it as well. In that case, the first four will become fard, and the last two will become nafil. And so he doesn't need to then repeat the prayer. Again, the same reasoning, that he had completed his prayer with the last sitting. The next two that he's prayed will then just count as nafil. And he should do sajda sahv as well. He should do sajda sahv for delaying his salam from its original position. That concludes that chapter on sajda of sahv. And so we'll stop there. Any questions before we? Okay, assalamu alaikum.